Hello, beautiful people. Hey, everyone. I'm so glad you all joined. I hope it wasn't by mistake because sometimes I'll be clicking on Instagram lives by mistake, but I'm so glad that you all are here. I am going to have a conversation with the lovely Raven Rodriguez about her Forbes article, or her Forbes interview, rather, on Judas and the Black Messiah. Hey, Raven.
Hi.
So nice to see
How
your
do
beautiful
I
face.
get, oh, thank you. How do I get a filter? That looks so cute.
Oh, if you go to the right side, there's a little smiley face with stars. Yes, you got
That's so cute.
girl. I was like, yo, I have to have this filter on. Hey everyone. Oh, I like that one.
So funny.
Ooh. Hey Darian.
I don't know how this works.
And I think they'll let you take off the filter too.
All right, let me get out of here. I'm gonna be playing with this the whole time.
All day.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation. I don't want to I don't want to say it was the best, but it was one of the best interviews that I've conducted. Um,
Yeah.
Forbes loved our interview. I think you dropped so many gems. And I posted it on my LinkedIn, and a lot of people were giving really good feedback and they thought it was amazing. So I guess the first question that I want to ask you is like, why do you feel like it's so important for people to watch this film? Because I know that there's probably some people that are watching right now who haven't seen the film yet. I love that Darian said the best interview I've read. I love that. I love it. I love it. So why do you feel like it's
Yeah.
so important for everyone to? Hey, Sean, I know that some of the people that are watching do DEI work, but why do you feel like it's so important for people, everyone, to watch the film?
Um, it's a movie for Black people. Honestly, and I know we talked about that. Like, it's a film for Black people. And I think a lot of people think they make films for Black people when they
Mhm.
make slavery films. There's a lot of white gaze in cinema, and films are made for white people, or they're made about Black people through a lens of whiteness, meaning what we look like to white people or what white people think our lives are like. And this film is a film for Black people across the board. I think it's a film for Black people who need the motivation or the reminder of why some of us do the work that we do. And I also think for Black folk, like I have a ton of friends who watched this film, and it was um, so transformational for them in the sense that, like, one of my good friends called me up afterwards, and he's um, very capitalistic, right? Like, we go back
Mhm.
and forth about this all the time. And he called me afterwards, like, in near tears, because this film really forced him. Bill's character resonated with him in a way that made him uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and he didn't like how much that character resonated with him, and it
Mhm.
pushed him to ask himself some really difficult questions, which is why I say this is a film for Black people. It's not just a film for people doing activist work.
Mhm.
It's a film for Black people, I think, to really like unpack the way Black people have been told for so long we're supposed to think,
Mhm.
or what we think success is, or what we think, like liberation is. I just think across the board, every Black person should be watching this film.
hmm and it's funny. I'm just looking at the comments, and Darian mentioned American Skin. I haven't watched that, but people
He
keep.
has been complaining about it. Darian, get over it.
I haven't watched it yet, and people keep recommending it to me.
Yeah,
Now I'm like, should I watch it? Should I not watch it?
yeah,
To go back to your point, yeah, I mean, it made me. It really like. I think a lot of us watching had to like stop and just. There were so many parts, and we talked about it in the interview. But like, I don't know. The one that really got to me was where Bill's character was just like, "We're not going to win this war," and I was, it's like, damn, is that like? I started thinking, is that true? Are we not going to win this war? Should we give up? Because sometimes,
yeah.
that's how I be feeling. I'm just like it just feels so like are these people going to change? Is this structure going to change? Am I
Mm.
just wasting my time? Should I just get my bag and go, you know? And that's sometimes how I feel. And I know that's how sometimes a lot of us feel, like, I'm just one person. Am I really going to change? Am I going to make this change? So what
Yeah.
do you say to like people who feel like that, who
I feel
feel,
like that all the time. So like I'm 100% like nothing, few things annoy me more than like the toxic positivity. Uh,
Mhm,
you I have moments all the time. I mean, I recently left a role, right? I resigned from my job at Yale in November because of that overwhelming, like I felt like I was pedaling, going nowhere.
mhm,
And that's gonna happen. And I think it's irresponsible to act like that's not going to happen or to act like you can avoid burnout.
mhm,
Um, a mentor, someone that I consider a mentor, one time told me, I was like talking about burnout and talking about wanting to like avoid it or asking him for advice on how do I avoid burning out in this space. And he gave me advice that I was not expecting, which was you're going to burn out. Burnout is inevitable. You're actually going to burn out multiple times throughout the course of your career.
mhm,
Um, and it's how you take care of yourself, right? It's
mhm,
like it's how you care for yourself in a way. Because the reality is I've had moments where I too was like, oh no, I'm done. Like I'm
mhm,
done with people. I'm gonna go do something else. Like I'll find a different career, whatever. I've thought it all.
mhm,
And the reality of just like identity is that where am I going to go in this world where my blackness is not going to matter? Where am I going to go where white supremacy is not going to affect me or impact me? It doesn't exist. And so
mhm,
as much as we like to think we can escape the reality of like doing this work, it's not about the work. It's just the reality of the world that we live in
mhm,
and the burden associated with being black.
mhm.
And I,
I just have to say, I like tip my hat off to you because I know that in your last role, it must have been difficult. You know, I think the world is all, social media has amplified our need, myself included, amplified our need to like showcase our accolades. And to say that you're at literally like one of the best universities, institutions in the world, and you left that for to prioritize your mental well-being, I think that's amazing. That's like just, it's something that a lot of people don't have the strength to do. So I just have to like tip my hat off to you and commend you for that, because it's hard. It's hard to get rid of your title, to get rid of the money that was coming with that, the prestige, you
girl,
know, and
that
it's like, I know there's a lot of people right now who are like in the struggle and who are like, I don't want to leave because, and you know, like, my mom was in a situation where she was a school teacher and she left. She's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have y'all tell me to change my grades, change the grades of these white students. I'm not going to do it. And I just find that at the moment I was like, Mom, why did you leave? Like, why did you do that? You had a good job, you have benefits, you have this, you have that. But it's like, at the end of the day, these jobs, like, I saw a meme that was like, imagine dying and your job clocks you out like the same day, and these jobs don't, these companies don't care, and it's to them. So it's like, why drive yourself into the ground for a company or an organization that doesn't care about you, that doesn't give you a second thought? So
I
it's
was
like, really,
no,
for people who are like in the trenches, do you have any advice for that? What, like, how did you feel? Because I think a lot of what the film showed me was sacrifice, and it really emphasized like how creating a better world is going to take sacrifice from all of us. And I don't think a lot of people, myself included, a lot of us don't want to sacrifice. We feel like we've sacrificed enough. So I guess what are your thoughts on that? And I know for a lot of people it's just difficult to make those sacrifices. So how are you feeling about that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I found myself saying all the time, in spaces with white people specifically, like when I was at Yale, everyone would be, I did a lot of strategic planning. Still, a lot of the work that I do is in strategy, and we can talk forever about implementing like incredible initiatives and programs and like all of these things, ideas, right? We could talk ideas forever, theoretically forever. No one ever wants to talk about what is required of us to give up. Like no one ever wants to talk about that. Specifically not white people, like right? Like white people do not want to talk about when it comes to actually being anti-racist, that's not just changing the way you feel about people. It's actually giving things up. It's surrendering a lot of the things that you have that you did not earn, a lot of the privileges associated with your skin color that should not be, and opting out essentially. So sacrifice is huge. When I think of like the work or whatever that, you know, because that gets thrown around so much, and I understand work looks differently for everyone, but whatever that work is, you can't do it without sacrifice. And it's also like a commitment to learning. And we talked about this a lot, and I talk about this a lot, like whether you're calling it anti-racism work or anti-oppression work, what you're doing is you are committed to lifelong learning. And if that's not at the center of what you're doing, then you're performing, right? If you aren't learning, then you're performing. It's one or the other. And I tell my students that all the time. You need to be learning constantly. So I don't know. I feel like for me, there's so many things on my mind.
I want to hear all of them.
I know, you know, I can talk forever. I don't know. For me, it's just like with this film, I think there was so much centered in the film that kind of gave us a blueprint of what we need to be centering in our conversations, right? In our work, whatever that work looks like. So, down to like this, down to just the aesthetics, like the fact that in every scene where Fred is seen speaking to his comrades, they're in a classroom, they're in a learning setting. Like just they did, oh my God, they did such an incredible job at centering the fact that these men were scholars. They were just loud and opinionated, and like they were scholars. They were actively, constantly engaged in learning. And that's 100% what the revolution is going to look like. What it's going to be. It's going to be a commitment to learning, a commitment to being a student of this process. And I don't know, girl, like I'm getting lost in my thoughts, but sorry, I'm getting a text. I probably totally didn't answer your question too. What was your question again? I'm so sorry.
You did, because you brought it back to the film, and the film like reminded me of how those of us who do the work or want to create a better place, a better space, a sacrifice is going to always be involved in that. So you did talk about that, because I think for a lot of us the sacrifice is hard. It's hard to like, even for as someone who does, and I hate to say the work, but as someone who goes into organizations and they hire me to talk to white people or to talk to anyone within these companies, a lot of it's easier to just coddle people's feelings and get the bag, you know? Like, why don't I just go in there, do what they're asking me to do and get the bag? Why would I sacrifice my comfort, my safety, my financial security if this is what's going to work and they're going to pay me? You know, I hear people saying a lot, well, this is my reparations. You know, they're going to pay me to do this, even though I know it's not changing the structure. So I'm going to take it. And it takes a sacrifice. And I think it's hard. I recognize it's really, really challenging to be able to, even like what you did, it walking away from a prestigious job, walking away from the comfort and the security. It's hard. And it's like, how do you, I guess my question would be like, how do you get to the point where of like a Fred Hampton, where you are willing to, like, I just found that scene where, you know, they were having the conversation about him possibly going back to jail. And like that scene to me was just so moving. And sorry for anyone who hasn't seen it, because we're giving a lot of spoilers away. But that scene was so moving, and that he was like, you know, I'm not trying to run away, and just like, safety is not my concern. My concern is my people. And if that requires me to go back to jail, then that's what it has to be. And I'm like, that scene was just like, wow, for me. Because I was like, could I do that? I don't know if I, you know, and so it's just like, how do you get to that point, I guess, would be my question of like, how do you get to that level? Because I think that's what we all aspire to be, revolutionaries. How do you get to that point? I know that's like a question.
No. I was just like, it's the phone is leaning up against my laptop, and you just remind me of like something someone said to me once that's definitely on my laptop somewhere, and I'm trying to find it. But it was basically along the lines of like, a strategic plan and investment are worth going to jail for, right? But when you don't have those things, and this was someone that works with like Black youth and like organizing in Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
and an incredible man who like has taught me so much, but he found himself constantly saying that to these young people who would go out to protest, who would go out to do all these things, who would get arrested, right? And then their plans, their lives sometimes were derailed by them being arrested for wanting to protest, or for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or being in the right place at the right time, but law enforcement. And I thought about that so much in this film. And in that scene, which we talk about in the article, where I love that scene so much, because I was sitting there. This film is interesting, right? Because you have this thing, even with like spoilers, I find myself telling people like, damn, don't read the article, or like, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's history, right?
Yeah.
Like, we
Yeah.
know what
Exactly.
happens, right?
Yeah.
But I'm
Exactly.
for you, like, we know what happens. But at the same time, even I forgot that this is history. And so I'm sitting there in that scene, and I'm like, oh, this man is about to run. Forgetting like, no, Raven, this is a retelling
Yeah.
of history. But I loved it. I was so happy in that moment, because that again was such a learning moment about him, where we watched him remind his comrades, like, this is not about me. Y'all need to stop centering me. And what I heard in that moment was like, we need to stop centering ourselves. It's not about us at all. And why plan on how he can, like, avoid a 5-year sentence? That man has his strategic plan. He has his investment. That is worth going to prison for him. It no longer is worth going to prison for when it's about him, and he did all of this work and went to prison for nothing, right? So when we instead shift our focus, like they did, on how they could use those 5 years potentially, or think about how many people they could help in those 5 years, that's the goal. That was the whole purpose. That was the whole impetus behind him being incarcerated in the first place. He was being arrested unfairly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to stop a movement. And so for him to shift the focus onto himself would be him doing exactly that,
Mm-hmm.
stopping this. If your movements, and this is something I also tell like students and activists, if your movements revolve around you to a point that they're ineffective without you, they're not movements.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. And I think one incredible thing he did was, the movement didn't need him to be at the forefront in order to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
It was about him. Um, and like we talk about in the article, we see that so much, so
Mm-hmm.
much, with folks personalizing. And it's
Yeah.
hard to say that, almost, because the work is really personal. Like, I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've wanted to like choke someone for telling me that like I take my work too seriously, or I take it too personally.
Yeah.
I'm like,
No, but I get a lot is like, you have to make does every conversation have to go back to white? Like, people are like, here you go with that white
you know what
supremacy.
I tell people though? I'm like, you find something for us to talk about that has not been impacted by
Mm-hmm.
this, and that I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But the reality that we don't want to admit, or that we don't want to acknowledge, is that there are none.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are none. And once I always joke, even though it's not a joke, it's pretty true. Doing this work for as long as I have, or as being as invested as I am, it has changed the way I see the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not looking for the race and the white supremacy and everything. I'm not looking for it actively. I don't have to look for it. I see my lens on everything has shifted. And sometimes I wish it hasn't. And other people tell me that. My mom tells me all the time. The more time she spends with me, she's like, oh my God, I just see things differently now.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing the same. And as difficult as that is, I think sometimes to like adjust to, I think it's also such a blessing,
Mm-hmm.
because what were we seeing before then?
Yeah. Yeah. I
What
mean, you've like just listening to you, and I said this to you. It didn't make it to the interview, but I told you personally that like I found everything you were sharing on Clubhouse so profound, and I was like, oh, I have to find her on Instagram, and I started following you on Instagram, but I just found the way that what you shared on Clubhouse, which I would love for you to plug your club on Clubhouse, but like what you shared just shifted my thought process, especially as somebody who never really considered the white lens that a lot of the education that I was providing these organizations had. That's not something that I fully like. I've been feeling like it, but it wasn't until listening to you on Clubhouse that I was able to conceptualize it and put it into words what I had been feeling. So I just appreciate you so much for that. And just like, I just feel like I want to give you, of course, always give you your flowers, because I just think you are so profound in the way that you help people to see things from a different perspective and help to shift our perspective. And I know other people said that, who've listened to you on Clubhouse, but could you like share also about your Clubhouse? And I know that you host weekly conversations or conversations often, but could you share a little bit about that also? Because I feel like everyone should be joining and should be participating in the conversations with you.
Thank you. I've been on a bit of a hiatus right now, but I'm working on bringing it back. So the name of the club, it is that deep.
I
Stems
love.
it, yeah, and it just came to me too. It's not even something that I was like, I wanted to. I know I wanted to start a club after being on the app for like a month and a half. Um, and I didn't know what the club would be about. I didn't know what to name it, but I found myself moving in and out of rooms, not rooms about race, not rooms about racism, silly, often like the silliest rooms, which is a huge part of like my personality, just like needing to laugh and find joy in everything so that I'm not like always crying. And I found myself moving in and out of these rooms, and 15, 20, 30 minutes into being in these spaces, helping the people in the space unpack a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, even in these spaces that are not designated spaces for learning, we're doing so much learning. And
Mm-hmm.
it's my favorite kind of learning because it's informal, it's accessible. No one is gatekeeping in here. It's not a stage full of academics.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Um, and what we were often doing, right, was like unpacking this idea that, oh no, it's not that deep. Like, not everything is about race. Well,
By the way, I hate that saying when
oh my
people,
God, it's the worst.
oh,
It's
it's not that deep. Oh, but it is. Like,
the worst.
I hate that.
One of my favorite quotes ever is like, um, it's not always race, but it's never not race, right? And it's in everything. It is in everything. And so it is that deep is really weekly conversations, themed conversations where we do our best. When I say we, it's myself and my good friend Chantrice King, who I met at Yale. She is absolutely brilliant. She's a brilliant Black midwife. She does a lot of work in health equity, specifically in maternal mortality, working with Black women, delivering babies. Like, she is just legendary. And we have these conversations, these very informal, like anyone has ever tuned in and listened, we're laughing, we're playing around, we're listening to City Girls. Like, we have these really informal conversations where it's like, this is the information that, one, we were all denied because our educations have been so whitewashed, even
Mm-hmm.
at Yale, right? It's like the
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
epitome of whitewashed education. Our education has been so whitewashed. So a lot of this is the stuff we've been denied. And then two, how do we tie the things that we're talking about every day, like everyday conversation, relationships, friendships, film, music? How do we tie all of these themes back to oppression? And
Mm-hmm.
the way oppression is so evident in our, like, in everyday life. It's
Mm-hmm.
not an academic concept. And that was the whole idea behind me starting this club, because I found that the only people who I could get to willingly engage in like anti-oppressive conversation were academics or folks who are like who see themselves as being intellectuals. But when I would sit in on very informal conversations, they were having the same conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't being gate kept.
Yeah.
I was like, no, this needs to be bigger. Also, really curating a space where people don't feel like they have to be an academic to
Mm-hmm.
and one thing about my room, like my club, for anyone that's ever been in there, like if you know how Clubhouse works, you can have like people on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
I kick people off the stage all the time. Like I move people off the stage if Darian
I
is still.
love when I hopped in your room, you were reading Black feminist text. The two
Mhm.
of you were reading, and I love that you didn't have anyone on the stage. Because sometimes I'd just be like, I don't want to hear, it's like a podcast. I love the podcasts I love the most are not the ones where there's a lot of guests, but the ones where you can listen to the podcaster, the person who's created it. And that's what I felt like your space was, where I just went in and I just wanted to listen. I just wanted to listen to y'all speak, listen to what parts of these texts resonated with y'all and your interpretations, rather than like hearing people on a stage like pontificate about like, oh, this is what I feel. I was just like, no. So I loved when I went into your room, and anytime I hear you on the stage, I just feel like, wow, that's like super profound what she shared and what she said. And yeah, so whenever you're back from the hiatus, which I'm sure will be soon,
Yeah.
I definitely wait to like join in on more of these conversations. There was something that you said, and I have the article pulled up. There was a quote that you said, and I was looking for it, but everyone loved that quote where you said, and I can't find it.
Was it the end of the article? No, wait, was it about wanting to own a piece of America?
No, it
Oh.
was. You were talking about. You said something everywhere, something about it being everywhere. But I'll find it, because a few
Oh, about
people messaged
oppression?
me and were like, "This is so
Oh, when I said
yes, possible."
what was it? In order for oppression
Yes,
to live
yes, that
everywhere, it
was
has
it.
to live everywhere. I think
And
yeah. No, that's
yeah,
a
in order
fact.
for oppression to live anywhere, it has to live everywhere. Yeah. No, and that's like it
Yeah.
reminded me of that. So for those who are just joining, where I'm talking to Raven Rodriguez, who uh, I interviewed her for a Forbes article on her thoughts on Judas and the Black Messiah, and how important and impactful the film is. So we've just been talking about that. But I loved that quote, and it's hard. I think like the capitalism piece of the film, going back to the film, I think that's hard for a lot of us to grapple with, because it's like we live in a capitalist society and we have to operate under the I don't want to say the rules, but we have to operate under like the rules of this society. But it's also like I was having a conversation with someone today, and he was like, yo sis, I just got to get the bag. And I thought back to the movie, and I thought about like like I know that we got to get the bag, we got to like get ourselves out of poverty and all of this, but it's also like just thinking about how capitalism and how in order for capitalism to function, there has to be people at the bottom. And just what a world, I've been thinking about and imagining what a world without capitalism and racism would be like, and it's really difficult for me to imagine what that would be like. But do you ever like just sit and think what the world would be like if all of these systems of oppression and racism and capitalism no longer existed? Like what would that even look like?
Um, I spend a lot of time reading Angela Davis because she talks a lot. And I think one thing about reading Angela is that, and I don't think we read Angela enough. Like
Mm-hmm.
we definitely don't read Angela enough, because I find folks asking questions a lot, like when we're speaking, and I hate a solution asked, like, well, what's the solution? I'm like, okay, we're not going to do that, because
Mm-hmm.
there are many layers to this. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing Angela does, which I don't think we talk about enough, is the fact that she has answered these questions for years.
Mm-hmm.
For she's been answering these questions. She's not just saying like, oh, we should get rid of this. She's literally telling you why and what a new system would look like.
Yeah.
Right? I think not when we talk about giving Black women their flowers, it's evident that we don't. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I spend so much time on Black feminist texts, because they really laid the foundation years ago. They
Mhm.
gave us the tools, they gave us the answers, and we're out here really trying to reinvent the wheel.
Mhm.
We need to be doing is listening
Mhm.
and going and implementing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think about it all the time. I think what I think about more though is what role am I going to play in it? Because I think it's the responsibility, like, right, Black people we're not monolithic.
Mhm.
And we're not all going to play the same role. I think one thing Shantrice and I laugh about a lot, and we talked about it in our last clubhouse room, was the whole like we were kings, we were descendants of kings
For
and queens.
kids, yeah.
No, we laugh about that
For
so much.
Kang.
Yeah, oh my god, like one of my favorite memes, right? Like we was like, okay, first of all, some of us might
Yeah.
be descendants. But what is this obsession, right, with being descendants of like Black royalty?
Yeah.
Um, Monarchs don't do shit. Like
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
do anything, right? They don't keep society afloat. They're
Mhm.
not doing the hard work. Many of us were descendants of cooks
Mhm.
and cleaning staff
Yeah.
and shoemakers and just like like hard working members of society.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I just think the obsession with being like the whole Black excellence
Mhm.
and Black royalty, I think it's really problematic
Mhm.
because
That's a
it's
really good
so deeply
that
tied. Yeah,
yeah.
it is so deeply tied to capitalism. And
Mhm.
even more, it's tied to this idea that like in order to be worthy of respect, you have to be exceptional.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
don't have to be exceptional to like deserve humanity and
Mhm.
respect at all. And I
Yeah.
see that in young Black people, right? So before I was at Yale, I was teaching middle
Mhm.
school and high school. And I think the most heartbreaking thing is that we watch these young Black kids, we watch these children, these babies, feel like if they are not exceptional, if they are not celebrity
Mhm.
athletes, musicians, right? Then their Blackness doesn't matter.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
doesn't. And I don't know, I just see so many parallels in us also with like when we speak about Black excellence, when we speak about like Black royalty, what are
Mhm. Oh, I think your sound went out for a second.
sorry.
Okay, it's back.
Yeah,
Yeah, you probably
Bluetooth
got
picked
it.
up my AirPods. So yeah, I think
Oh.
that's really problematic. And we really need to like be able to talk about that too. Like, what are we really saying when
Mhm.
we're talking about Black excellence? And then those who
Mhm.
talk about it and who like preach it and whatever. What I also find that we're doing when we do that is we're talking about and to Black people who have had similar experiences to us. So
Mhm.
what about all the Black people who haven't? Are they not a part of your
Yeah.
movements? So that's
Yeah.
another issue that I have with like academia. And when
Mhm.
I say I have an issue with academia, first of all, people usually look at me crazy because they're like, okay, you are an
You're
academic.
it. Yeah.
Also, what the misconception there is that I'm saying I have a problem with white spaces in academia. People think like, oh, so you must Harvard and you must be talking about Yale. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm talking about those spaces, but I'm also talking about Howard. And
Mhm.
I'm talking about
Mhm.
all of them. I'm
Mhm.
talking about any institution that says it's superior to the community it exists in.
Mhm.
That's essentially what I'm talking about. And when I
Yeah.
think of Howard University and the students I've worked with at Howard and the friends, some of my dearest friends went to HBCUs and
Mhm.
they loved their experience. But at the same time, many of them felt like their Blackness in those spaces was never validated, was never valid.
Way.
One of my good friends went to Howard
Mhm.
and she loved it. But she often talks about the fact that she, didn't grow up with money.
Mhm.
She didn't play sports.
Mhm.
And so it was great being in a space where everyone looked like her, right? There were Black people around constantly, which that alone I think is just good for your mental health.
Mhm.
But at the same time, the Blackness that is celebrated in these Black elite spaces is
Mhm.
not everyone's Blackness.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, right, like, so when we talk about
That-
academia, and when I say, like, I have a problem with academia, I have a problem with any environment that says you need to be exceptional to be here. I'm talking about all of them. I'm not just talking about the white ones. And
Mm-hmm.
then we create, and I talked about this in the article too, like when I mentioned Black-owned systems of oppression,
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah.
create elite Black spaces, and we're
Yeah.
doing the same shit the white people do to us.
Yeah.
Only each
There was
other.
a good discussion on Clubhouse about, I'm not that familiar with the Jack and Jill organization, but I know it's one of those elite sorts of, and they were having a conversation about this, and it just echoes everything that you're saying, where it's like they've created this, like, I think that we have this idea that Black owned spaces can't also be oppressive. I think that's what we've shifted to, is like, and I do it too, where it's like support Black businesses. I would rather give my money to a Black owned business, but also like in thinking about how these Black run structures can perpetuate the same types of oppression. And one of my close friends teaches at an HBCU, and we've had conversations, or she used to teach at an HBCU, and we've had conversations about that, because I'm like, just fascinated by her experiences, and how it's like this idea is, once you get off of like the corporate plantation, so to speak, and you get
Mm-hmm.
into these Black owned spaces, you're not going to have those same experiences. And it's like, no, a lot of these Black spaces are replicating the oppression that we see in mostly white spaces.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they're preparing their students not to dismantle systems, but to join them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how many of those students
That's a
come
good.
Black owned, these elite Black spaces, not ready to dismantle capitalism, but to conquer it? Like
Mm-hmm.
all of my Black friends who are like in finance and, doing incredible financially, lawyers, finance people, just like really incredible folks, doctors. Um, they're doing amazing things,
Mm-hmm.
but they were so prepared to enter society and dominate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we see Black excellence as. And that's what I mentioned in the article when I was like, this country, and we all know this, like explicitly, implicitly wants us to fail, wants
Mm-hmm.
to see us die, literally, right? Like wants to see us dead. And yet we still can't wait to own a piece of it,
Mm-hmm.
and can't wait to sit at the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have enough conversation in these elite Black spaces about why do you even want to join this? Like, what
Yeah.
is for what? Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense to me. And I know it's easier said than done,
Yeah.
because there's also cultural implications too. Like, how many of our parents do not want to see us be doctors and lawyers? And especially if you're an immigrant, right? Like across the diaspora, every
Mm-hmm.
Black immigrant is like, their parents told them, yeah, you can be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. Those are your options.
Yeah.
We don't have time for other things,
Mm-hmm.
like I remember in college telling my dad that I wanted to like study English, and he looked at me like, girl, what? Yeah, he was like, no. And then I remember, this is actually a funny story. I remember that I went through a point where I really wanted to study theology.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to study theology. Even in college, I remember telling my dad, like, I really think that I want to study theology. And he was like, do you know what theology is? And I'll never forget this. I was like, what's theology? And he was like, that's when you pray for a job. That's what, that's what theology was. And it's something,
Like that. That's.
and I laugh about all the time, because I'm like, wow, that is the messaging. That's what we tell young Black people. Like, you educate yourself to find work, to
Mm-hmm.
be paid,
Mm-hmm.
successful. But that success is so inextricably linked to salary.
Yeah.
Like, who
And
is going to pay
about
you?
Black people who don't, like you said, who aren't like what we imagine success to be, who aren't the lawyers and the doctors and the this
Yeah.
and that. And I see Coach says that's so true, coming from an international business coach. Coming from an international business coach, this is an interesting perspective. Yeah, I think, one book that I loved was Hood Feminism, and she talked about this in the book. But I think it's just like the idea that Black excellence has to look a certain way, and anyone that doesn't fit into that isn't worthy of being protected, isn't worthy of isn't worthy, period. And that's something that challenged what I had previously been programmed to believe is like you work hard, you achieve, you collect achievements and accolades, and that is the measure of success. And just, you know, in the last few years, I've just been thinking like, but what about the other people that don't have those?
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm not successful because I don't have this and this and this and that? And am I not worthy of, you know, am I not worthy of protection and
Yeah.
love? And just, it's so deep and profound, just like having this conversation. And like you said, I think more Black spaces and Black people within Black spaces need to be having these conversations, but it makes us feel good to feel that sense of like we're,
Oh, of course.
you know,
Yeah. And I
like
think most importantly, when there's nothing wrong with being a Black doctor, there's nothing wrong with being um, a Black anything,
mm-hmm,
right? But at the same time, when that's the goal, when that's the only goal presented to us, when that's the only measure of success, right, that we
yeah,
give before we give each other, we are totally ignoring. We're not even talking about all of the barriers in place for everyone, for Black people. Like,
mm-hmm,
why don't we have more Black doctors? Why don't we have more Black lawyers? Why is that not a feasible possibility for
mm-hmm,
all Black people?
mm-hmm,
Is a more important conversation
mm-hmm,
that often gets erased or like talked over
mm-hmm,
because we're so busy celebrating the Black people who are doing it, and they deserve their flowers because they are working 10 times harder than any white person in those spaces ever had to work.
mm-hmm,
But if we're not constantly drawing attention to the systemic barriers in place
mm-hmm,
that don't make our achievements feasible for all Black people, that's a problem.
yeah,
So it's not for me to just be like, I'm a Black academic, give me all my flowers. I want to use the fact that I'm a Black academic to talk about why is this not possible for all Black people,
mm-hmm,
and
yeah,
what barriers exist, and what am I doing? What am I doing to remove those barriers, right? Like how am I incorporating that into my work every single day?
mm-hmm,
'Cause it's not about celebrating being here.
mm-hmm,
Like, Yale's a scam, right? Like all of these white Ivy spaces are they're straight up scams. No one in those spaces is smarter than any Black person I've ever met. None of them worked as hard as any Black person I've ever met. It is a scam.
mm-hmm,
Um, and so why am I going to celebrate being here?
mm-hmm,
I think it would be a much better use of time to take a look around and be like, this is what y'all doing in here? Like, y'all scamming the world.
yeah,
Yeah, this is crazy. And doing something about it. Um, so yeah, I think that we definitely need to talk more about um, the Black excellence thing. And
yeah. No, I that's such a good
yeah,
point that I haven't really fully considered how problematic just the, and even like the we were kings, we were, you know.
it's so funny, and I spend so much time laughing at it, but it's so problematic too because I'm like, and if your great granddaddy, if he was a janitor,
That's okay.
that's okay. Like, are you not worthy of respect and humanity and decency? You have to be a descendant of like a king. Is
Yeah.
that what that's the kind of Blackness that we respect? And that's when I was at Yale, there were a group of law students who had shirts. It was during like the Breonna Taylor, George Floyd murders, and they had made these shirts that said Black law students matter or
Mm-hmm,
Black lawyers matter, something like that.
mm-hmm,
And I was like, like we need to talk.
mm-hmm,
Seriously. One, I can't with the t-shirts and like the branding of like the meaning of liberation and all that. But
yeah,
at the time, I was like, first of all, it's bad enough they don't understand when we say Black Lives Matter. Like,
yeah,
it's bad that everybody likes to act like they don't know what we're talking about. What we're not gonna do is now turn it into a punchline.
yeah,
Like, Black poor people matter, Black
mm-hmm,
sex workers matter, Black
mm-hmm,
strippers matter, Black baby mothers matter. Like, everything Black matters.
yeah,
You be a Black lawyer to matter.
yeah,
If you are a Black lawyer, the sad reality is you already matter
mm-hmm.
more than a Black unemployed person, and that's a problem.
Or you had the law degree, you know.
Yeah, problem.
But it's like
So
this, it's so easy to play into that and to feel, because it feels good to feel like I'm part of this elite, even though
yeah,
I'm part of an oppressed group or I'm marginalized. It makes me feel better to know that there's somebody below me. And I think that we need to like analyze that a little bit more. And I think like even analyzing the validation that we seek from these I'm not going to go into deep, but these organizations and these, just why is it that once that you have to, even just the accolades that people like chase after is like these white awards, these white accolades. Why do you feel like you need white validation? You already were already great.
yeah,
And without that, you still are going to be great. The end all be all is not white validation, but I understand that we're programmed in the society to believe that the pinnacles of success are anything that's tied to whiteness, from the neighborhood we live in
yeah,
and where we live. I'm big with like, and I say this as a person that grew up in the suburbs, but I just, I wish more people were going into these neighborhoods where there were more people that look like us. But I understand that the marker of success is going into the white neighborhoods. It's like
yeah,
I'm living in XYZ place now. And I feel like I want more of us to just reanalyze that belief system that was taught to us, that once you make it, you got to get out of this condition. You got to get
yeah,
yourself a job at this place, work for 35, 40 years, get your pension or get your, retire. And it's like, that's not all that it is. For some people, that's what it is. And I respect that, but that's not all that it is. And I want us to change the narrative.
yeah. And it's hard for those of like, I'm a millennial. And so having these conversations with like my parents and my grandparents, they looked at
Yeah.
me like you left your job? Like who does that? What privilege? Like the privilege associated with it. They were like, "Are you crazy?" And like my grandparents, my whole family was just like, "This girl did what? Lost her mind. Like you think you're white? What are you doing? You don't resign. You don't give up opportunity. Seriously." And I'm like, "Yes, no, I'm so glad we're saying this because that's the problem. That's
Mhm.
the problem that like and it tying the movie back in, the first scene that we see Fred Hampton in when he's talking to like students and they reminded me so much of like Black student activists who I've spent so much time and how they were like cheering and they were so excited that the college was being renamed like Malcolm X College and they were bringing in this Black academic to be the president and they're like, yes, this is progress, like we did it. And he's like, you think they're free over there? Like you think
Yeah.
they and I love like the nuances even before he got up and started talking when the
Mhm.
woman was still speaking, he was in the background just like kind of like rolling his eyes like, why are y'all so excited?
Yeah.
What barriers are being removed by us
Yeah.
renaming college after a man? He wasn't a building reformist. Like he didn't care if
Yeah.
a named after him. He wanted us to be free.
Hmm.
He not that building either. So I just think like really, which we talk about in the article, really being sure that you know what does liberation look like to you. Some of the people who I know are doing like Black liberation work, or at least that's what they describe their work as. Um, and they do like panels and speaking engagements all the time. And they essentially get paid to talk.
Hmm.
But ask them, what does Black liberation look like to you? They don't have an answer.
Hmm.
No. And I'm like, so what are you working towards? Like,
Right. That's
what?
I that's a question that everyone should be asking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What does it look like to you? What does a workplace where you're like, I know for some people it's like I can't even imagine, I know for my mom, she's like, what? That's not going to exist. That doesn't exist. So I'm not going to continue to be in a space where, and I again, I just respect that so much because it's hard. It's really hard. It's easier to just close your eyes and be like, well, I gotta feed myself. So I'm gonna just push
Yeah.
through. But I think everyone will get to a point where they have to make that decision, and they make that decision where they're like, some people are pushed to it. You know, someone that I know just recently just had like a, I don't even know what you call it, like a breakdown, where she just was like mentally just like, I
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. I can't keep putting on this mask. I can't keep, it's just not sustainable for me, my health. I had a nervous breakdown, like all of these things. And it's like, where I think everyone gets to that point at some, you know, at some stage in their life, they're going to get to that point. And I think the sooner, I don't want to say these spaces aren't for us, but they're not for us. So
They're not.
I,
They're not. Yeah.
like, I don't want to say they're not for us, but they're not. But it's like, how can I make this space better for other Black folks? And that's what I constantly think about, is just like, how do I make sure that if I leave here tomorrow, that the Black people that come after me will have a better experience, will have a safer space, will feel valued and will feel appreciated more than I was, you know, and sometimes that might take me leaving the space for that to actually happen.
No, that's so real. And that's literally what was on my mind in these spaces. Like I go into these white, like these painfully white elitist spaces. And I mean, I made a career out of it. And it was never about teaching white people.
Mm-hmm.
It's never about making them better. It
Mm-hmm.
was always about looking around, and there were so many Black people, young Black people, important Black people, brilliant Black people. Um, and they weren't important because they were brilliant. They were important because they were Black. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm, yo, I can't, I felt like, nah, I need to make this space better for them and me. I think in years of like learning how to self-care and learning how to like take care of myself, I realized I needed to make it better for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't overnight that I was just like, yeah, no, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
like a
yep.
gradual,
Oh,
right?
100%. And that's why, like, when people ask me, like, I think I want to transition out or I think I'm like ready to leave, I always tell them, like, you don't rush that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, your body tells you
Mm-hmm.
you are ready. You listen to your body. And my body told me I was ready. Like, my body was like, it's time. But what kept me there, and there's like a line in my resignation letter, which ended up being leaked, and like it's this whole thing where I say explicitly in my letter to Yale, essentially, like, I stayed for Black people
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm leaving for Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, both decisions have always centered Black people. I was never here for y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Never. And anything that white people benefit in any way that white people benefited from my presence in any space,
Mm-hmm.
because they were listening, good for them, but it was never for them.
Mm-hmm.
It was always for Black people because we are so inherently unsafe.
Yeah.
If in any way I can contribute to making us feel safe, feel seen,
Mm-hmm.
heard, I'm going to do that in every single space. But I'm also going to leave when it's time,
Mm-hmm.
because I have, you know, like, I need to be able to care for myself. And luckily for me, my students and my colleagues really understood that.
Mm-hmm.
And so supportive and just continue to be so supportive. But it's not easy, you know, like, I gave up health insurance,
Mm-hmm.
gave up a comfortable salary, I gave up my home, I gave up so many things. Um, and it took a long time for me to get to a space where I was ready to do that. So I think it's important for me to say that, because it would be irresponsible to just tell Black people everywhere to quit their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's not realistic.
Yeah.
Not that we live in. No, it's not realistic. But I will tell Black people everywhere to listen to their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely listen to your body. And I also think it's important for me to acknowledge the privilege I have
Mm-hmm.
in being able to make that decision, in being able to leave my job, in being able to, like, I can still feed myself. You know, I'm not homeless.
Yeah.
That is not a reality for everyone. So I
Yeah.
also, when we get on these, like, a soapbox and we start telling Black people everywhere, like, leave your toxic workspace, or that's
Yeah.
not feasible for everybody,
Yeah.
especially not in a pandemic. Like,
Yeah.
it's really not.
And you know, people have different financial constraints, so
Yeah.
it's not feasible.
Mm-mm. No, no one's out here trying to take care of us. But
Right.
we know that. So
So
how would I be telling Black people everywhere, quit your jobs tomorrow? Like, what? For what? For what? You know, we already know this country does not take care of us financially, spiritually, mentally, physically. It's just sad. But I will say prioritize your fundamental needs.
Yeah.
Folks would always ask me, why did you come to Yale? And they would look at me crazy when I would be like, the health benefits, the health care. That's why I'm here. Like, I'm
Yeah.
literally without
No,
care.
real. It's like that's
Yeah.
100,000%.
Yeah. Oh, like, I'm a Black woman in America. I would like to know if I got pregnant tomorrow, I could give birth in a hospital where I'm less likely to die.
Yeah. And
Sure.
that's so real. You can't
Yeah. Like,
do that, you
yeah.
know.
So,
So my phone is telling me that it's gonna die soon. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I'm gonna post this on my page because I was just reading people's feedback, and it seems like, hey Sean, it seems like
I'm not in the comments. I wish I could see.
oh, you can. It seems like people are really enjoying the conversation. But my phone's about to die, which I need to work on, and I'm also gonna jump on Clubhouse. But thank you so much, Raven. It was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and just to have you drop gems. So thank you for your presence. And so, you know, I hope that people follow you and follow you on Clubhouse. And I just think you are amazing.
So
I
much.
that phenomenal. Thank you so much. But I think that's where we can leave off for the night. I look forward to more lives. I would love to do another live with you.
Please, please. This is my first live ever, so this is cool.
I know this is exciting. I broke your live cherry.
I know. I'm so excited.
But thank you so much, Raven, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.